Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show, Science Facts and Fallacies, episode 236. We got the band back together. This is the greatest hits episode. The man, you know him, you love him, Dr. Kevin Folta, dad jokes imminent. What's up, my man? It's been a long time. How are you?
Oh, gosh, I wish I could get everybody to do a collective pull my finger. You know, it's going over great with the baby. She's 4 months old. She thinks it's hilarious. So I got a good one. No, it's been fun. I really miss doing this a lot. I really, really do. I think about it all the time, and I listen to you and Liza, and I just wish I had another 10 hours in every day to do all the things I have to do. And, it's when you have the things you must do, the things you would like to do, and the things that you have to do, those things kind of start to collide. And my wanna-dos were taking time away from the must-dos. And I think that starts to become problematic. So here we are. Thank you for having me back. Man.
I feel it. You got to be a dad to Jantra. You got to be a professor. You got to be a scientist. It never ends. So in any case, welcome back. You're always welcome. We love having you on. And this is great. It does feel like sort of a throwback, like a family reunion you actually want to go to. And let's jump right into it. So as always, we've got 3 stories. So we're going to summarize them, and then Kevin's going to give us some of his sweet, sweet scientific expertise on these topics. So first up, industrial seed oils are killing you? ? Here's the health story behind cooking oils. Next up, why fellow moms shouldn't succumb to anti-GMO information when making family food choices. And finally, do opposites really attract? Partners in most successful relationships share political views, education, drinking habits, and so much more. Okay, Kevin, we've got a good mix of stuff here. This first one, I feel like has sort of a special place for you because you do a lot of work with farmers, and there's a lot of gurus on the internet selling this kind of industrial seed oil thing. So let's jump into this story. So this is by Ross Wallen, originally writing for Everyday Health. And he points out that we have nutritional influencers on Twitter and TikTok and elsewhere. And this seems to be part of the constellation of silly things that people say. So there's organic, and then there's, pesticides are going to kill you. And then there's gluten-free and low carb. And then industrial seed oil just sounds like a scary kind of whoa, what's an industrial seed oil? So he goes on to point out we're talking here about things like canola, soybean, corn, safflower, sunflower, cottonseed. All of these things, right? They're very common in your grocery store. They're in lots of processed foods and pre-prepared foods that you eat. And some of the things that they say about these, Kevin, and I'm curious to get your insight here, is that they're not wrong. So like, for example, they'll say that there's a chemical that's derived from crude oil that's used in I guess it's in the extraction of canola oil, for example. So they'll point to facts like these, and then they'll point out that consumption of these oils tended to increase at the same time that we were seeing rapid expansions, no pun intended, in the obesity rates. And so this is sort of like the perfect storm, right? You have scary chemicals, you have increasing obesity and heart disease and type 2 diabetes, right? So you have that sweet correlation. And then if you want to sell people, I don't know, coconut oil, you want to sell a supplement, or you want to sell a diet plan, it's the perfect way to go about it. So with that in place, dive in here and tell us a little bit more about these oils. Should we actually be scared of them?
Yeah, the other part of this that you left out on your stool of doom was they were made by multinational seed companies that sell the seeds, right?
Yes.
So this is Monsanto making a product, making seeds to be sold by industrial farmers who are corporate farmers who are using crude oil to make extraction chemicals. I mean, this one checks all the boxes. So that's why it's a really good whipping boy for the entire situation. So the thing is, it's oil that comes out of a seed. So plants are making these oils to sustain the embryo. The embryo is the little seedlet in the little plantlet there that lives in the seed that the maternal plant makes, which now has to survive for a while before it gets in the ground and gets some soil and sun and all the things it likes to germinate and grow. And one of the high calorie, high energy, useful things it has is seed oil. And so soybeans and canola and all of these critters, these plants will make oil in there to really sustain the embryo, which as it gets close to germinating, will break down these oils, or as it goes dormant, will break down these oils to make energy. Just so that kind of the when we find use for these oils in culinary applications, because oil is useful in many ways in cooking. The thing that people freak out about is, and you mentioned the idea that hexanes are used to extract these oils during the process. And you can press seeds and get oil out. That's just what they do. You know, you see on the olive oil, it says first cold pressed or something, right?
Mhm.
And you can do that with any oil. You can cold press it, but you don't get much out of the seed. If you grind it up in the meal, you extract it with the appropriate chemicals, you can separate uh, the oil from the rest of the stuff. And then using certain chemicals to help liberate that is part of the process. And so it's got a lot of the edges that are kind of unattractive in terms of scaring people away from food. And so what are those oils that they're using? This soybean, corn, um, sunflower, cottonseed. You know, there's a whole bunch of them. They used to call canola was rapeseed. You know, so it was probably the most widely used of the violent crime oils.
Yeah, poor choice of name for sure.
There was actually, when I was in China, there was I was at a new institute that they built in Shanghai, and where
Yeah.
I was working, and they put up a new building, and it said on the building the Rape Institute. Like they would have the
Ooh.
translation in the English, and I said, "You guys got to do a little rebranding here." You know, because I mean, I know what they meant and it translated from Chinese directly, but they wondered
Yeah.
why they weren't getting many American scholars. Um, don't want to study that. They had, but this is just was originally called rapeseed, rebranded as canola through some breeding tricks that took out some of the more offensive components of canola oil. Used to be a great industrial lubricant, which so the predecessor of canola oil didn't have the most attractive history, but canola oil is great stuff. And when you look at its profile, has a very similar fat content to olive oil, high
Mhm.
in monounsaturated fats. So you have these saturated. So when we start breaking down oils to saturated fats, monounsaturated fats, polyunsaturated fats, we believed from the 70s and 80s that it was the polyunsaturateds we wanted, the monounsaturateds we wanted. We're learning that saturated fats have a place. But what we're learning is the nuance of the omegas. So the oils have omega 3s and omega 6s. And just to basically give you a little, without going into too much gory detail, the omega 3s are the ones that are really good for heart health, brain health. These are the ones rich in fish oil, salmon, all that good stuff, but are also found in plants. And then omega 6s are the ones that tend to be a little more heavy in other vegetable oils. So, and that one's linoleic acid. And these tend to be more associated with vegetable oils. And still the jury's out on omega 6s. You see reports that say they're good, reports that say they're bad, reports that say there's no difference. So it's all over the place. What seems to be important is the ratio of omega 3 to omega 6 in your diet.
Mhm.
And that might have something. Normally it should be 2-to-1, 4-to-1. When you're eating a diet rich in vegetable oil and processed food, you're getting probably 20-to-1. They're omega 6 to omega 3. So
Mhm.
you're not getting the um, proper ratio, and maybe that has more to do with inflammatory responses in the body and aspects of this that can lead to detrimental health, especially with things like blood pressure and lipid content in the blood, hyperlipidemia, that kind of thing, cholesterol
Mhm.
perhaps. But so that's really where this comes from.
Okay. And that was one thing I was going to bring up to you is that there is, it seems, some contradiction in the literature. You know, you can find studies that seem to suggest that too much of a good thing, I guess you could say, is actually bad for you. Um, my suspicion, though, is that ultimately this is going to come down to just don't eat too much. You know, it's very unsexy advice, but it's really the truth. You know, if you eat less, you're going to take in fewer carbs and less sugar, and whatever the boogeyman is, saturated fat, unsaturated carbs, blah 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 blah. you're just going to get less of it if you eat less. And that's probably going to mitigate whatever you're concerned about. Even if there is some unique mechanism, like if there's something like one of these oils for some reason contributes to inflation, which has all kinds of nasty downstream effects. If you eat less of them, that effect is probably going to be minimized as well. Problem solved. Do some push-ups. Don't eat so many candy bars. You're going to be fine. Like that's where I'm ending up here. What do you think?
Well, we'll stay out of the center of the grocery store. And I mean, that's what it means, right? I mean, if you stay on the edge and you eat some fish and some meat and some bread and some produce, you're going to be okay. It's the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 and vegetable oil to the less saturated oils. The ones rich in omega-3s tend to throw off when you're, eating Triscuits and crackers and cookies and, processed stuff that's in the center of the store. It doesn't mean it's bad. It just means that you probably should eat less of it. And we kind of feel that way already just for other reasons. So I really, really object to the idea that the seed oil is the boogeyman. Seed oils are, we're very fortunate to have them in the abundance that we do. And some of the other aspects of this is when they're reused and continually reheated and used over and over again, how they can become unstable and rancid and maybe develop, carcinogenic compounds, perhaps nitrosamines and things. But in general, properly used seed oils are no big deal.
Well said. We'll leave it there. Maybe we can revisit it in the future. I don't know if I'm getting older and I'm just tired of health scares and I just don't have anything left for them. I got a lot of real things to worry about and I just can't handle that. Okay. So we'll leave that there. Let's move on to this next story. Somewhat related, I think, in that the people that push this also push the industrial seed oil scare stuff. This is by Wanda Pash, writing for Minnesota Farm Living. And this is cool. This is one of these blogs where you actually have farmers writing for the public.
Yeah, Wanda Pash. Yeah, Wanda.
Yeah.
I met Wanda a while ago. I don't remember where, and I really appreciate Wanda. She worked with a group. Was it Iowa Farm Moms or Midwest Farm Moms? I think she's from Minnesota, North Dakota, somewhere up there, and it's in the Minnesota Farm Living. So I'm guessing maybe Minnesota. Right. But, Wanda is awesome, and she's always been an excellent advocate for genetic engineering and for speaking to others like her, other moms and other people who had concerns. And I really appreciate that. And I really like this about her article. And I actually commented on it on Facebook a bunch because she got a little bit of a dust up there from some folks, believe that or not. And really her point here, and I won't go through her whole article point by point as much as steer people to it. So this was on Minnesota Farm Living, which is a blog. And she really touches on why this has been a problem. There's no evidence that shows that this is unsafe, but because of a intransigent minority of vocal critics, it seems like the problem remains. And she does a nice job in this article, really speaking to the choir about here are what the problems were. And she also says something in here that is not my approach, but something that I feel is really good for folks like her, that we need to have smarter consumers. Mm-hmm. And that it's a question of and she's speaking as the farm mom and farm grandmother to other perhaps rural folks or other even folks in the city who have kids and grandkids, that maybe it's a good idea to learn more about what you eat, but from factual sources, from good sources. And she lists some at the end of the article. And just she puts down in here for that, even Cheerios, which some people will scream, genetically engineered. There's no GMO oats. And so there's really nothing much in there other than perhaps the sugar, which is genetically engineered, sugar isn't genetically engineered. The sugar beet that made it is, and none of that stuff's in the sugar. So she just does a really nice job here with this particular article with talking about this. And really, I would encourage people to check it out because it does have an extension that I'll touch on in a second, but let me get your thoughts.
It's great. And like you said, we don't need to go through these. I think we've covered these over and over and over the years on this show and on Genetic Literacy Project. But one thing she says, and it resonates with what you did, which is that you need consumers to be a little more thoughtful about their purchases. And we had Dr. Cami Ryan on the show a few weeks ago, and she said the same thing, that, it's unlikely that you're going to perfectly control the spread of nonsense on the internet. It's just not easy to do. It probably unlikely. So she says you just kill the demand for it. And the way you do that is you educate people and you turn away the audience that the Joe Mercolas and the Del Bigtrees sell their silliness to. And so she says something to that effect. She says, moms need to be smart consumers and not fall for food fear marketing tactics. I know it's hard, and all too often consumers end up paying more for the GMO free. She says, remember the follow the money adage? That's exactly what this is about. It's about the money. In regards to General Mills Cheerio decision, the old and new Cheerios are the same, right? So there's nothing fundamentally different about the product. It just comes to checking your fear, thinking through things a little bit, which you have to do as a parent anyway, right? So just do it one more time, and hopefully over time that'll solve the problem.
And here's kind of an extension that I've found to be really popular lately and really making some traction. And I hope maybe folks will use in this is that really we should be suffering from genetic engineering disaster fatigue. Right. Because we've been told for 30 years, this is going to kill everybody and it's going to be a problem and rampant cancer and blah, blah, blah. None of that stuff ever happened. And all of the Jeffrey Smiths and the Senefs and the Mercolas and all the folks who promoted that, can we please put them away now? And, they really shouldn't have much influence on our scientific and food decisions. The big problem is that when you get, and this was on maybe on the associated Facebook page with this, that there was a woman who showed up in there saying, well, I got cancer because I ate too much genetically engineered stuff. And luckily I was able to be cured. And now I only have organic and the other stuff is toxic. And the problem is that if you want to make food choices, great, make them, eat what you want, pay what you want. I don't care. But when you start to create mistrust in food, if you're affluent enough to be able to afford those choices, fine. But you start to raise doubt in the minds of people who need to be eating more fruits and vegetables. And maybe people who don't have the same means and the same ability to procure, high-end groceries. They don't have a Whole Foods in the south side of Chicago, and those moms who the closest fruit and vegetables are some, in my town, where I live, if you don't have a car, the closest thing you got are some old onions and some apples and bananas at the convenience store. Mm-hmm. And so you start to give people the idea that their fruits and vegetables are dangerous. Now you're taking away from them the thing they need to be eating in order to stave off long-term degenerative disease, the healthiest stuff in the store, right? Mm. Yet we're telling them that it's poison. And then they go into the center of the store and eat Triscuits and Pinwheels and whatever, those other things, they eat more processed food, which then puts on some weight and contributes to health issues. So there's a collateral damage there. And I think it's really important for us to really start reminding people of that.
Well said. Well said. As always, don't take your health and nutrition advice from random people on the internet. It doesn't work out well. Okay. Final story of the day, Kevin. This one is interesting, but I still think we're going to call it from the No Duh files. This is Ian Sample writing in The Guardian, and title is, Do Opposites Really Attract? Partners in Most Successful Relationships Share Political Views, Education Levels, Drinking Habits, and more. So he's talking about a study here. I believe it was performed in the UK because they're using data from the UK Biobank. But they're looking at romantic relationships, and they found that 80% of traits analyzed in this study, from political views to drug taking to age, and even to, I think it was how many people or how old they were when they first had sex, right? I mean, this is how granular they're getting with this data. And what they found is that partners were remarkably similar. And I think it was somewhere between 82 and 89% for all of these traits they examined. And it was only in 3% of these traits that there was a substantial or a statistically significant difference, where you didn't have people matched up based on similarity. And they're going from 22 traits, and I presumably these are all different kinds of personality traits. I haven't actually read the paper, so maybe you could speak to that. But 22 traits across 200 different studies involving millions of male-female partnerships, going back, which is actually pretty striking here, to 1903. So this is a big chunk of data they're looking at. And it seems, compelling, but at the same time, as I said, no, you don't say, right? like nobody wants to spend their entire life with someone who's not like them in any way. What do you think here, though?
Yeah. So yeah, as you mentioned, this is kind of from the no duh file in a lot of ways we can talk about, but the idea, well, this is a meta analysis. So they're looking at all these data going back a long time. And in the end, they ended up looking at 133 traits from 80,000 opposite sex couples. Because they didn't look at same sex couples because that would probably skew data a little bit more, towards common things, because they even share more common things. So it was, so we could talk about that if you like. But what was really interesting were a lot of what made the report interesting are the things that didn't match. So things like height, weight, medical history, different personality traits. Those things didn't vary. I mean, they did show significant variation. So they even in couples that were together. So it doesn't say that everything fits nice, and some of these actual key physical attributes don't fit at all. So it really does add additional weight to the rest of these traits that they identified that did fit. Things like, when they say political views, habits, that kind of thing. But when you look at it, and this is what really kind of, there are a couple of things in this article that kind of freaked me out. One of the things was coupling along common lines may have future consequences. Researchers note, if tall people pair up with tall people, and short people with short people, coming generations could just have extremes. Same with social habits and that seems a little weird. And then they also extrapolate that same thinking to education. That if you have educated people and educated people pairing up, and non-educated, that you wide the socioeconomic divide. I don't know how true that really is. I think that these are very complex traits that aren't necessarily dictated by single genes, that kind of thing, and are more, and especially with respect to socioeconomic status, much more nurture than nature, or as much nurture as nature. And those kind of environmental components can play into it significantly. So I'm a little bit put off by that. But the basic idea is rather silly. That, well, I shouldn't say that. I should say it's just very intuitive. If you're some, grumpy old KKK guy at the Klan rally, you're not very likely to shack up with the young lass who's sourcing vegan cheese. You're in separate universes, so the chances of you getting together are probably not very good. And the reality is that the best relationships are coordinated by common friends. And that, people who say, well, I know this person who's in my office and, he seems pretty okay. And, so right. This is, the connections are sometimes made through third parties. That's how I met my wife. And this is, and so that's really the nice part about this. How many people, so it's like if you're, you go to your running club every Wednesday night and you hang out with the same people there, you're more likely to meet the person who's in the running club who shares those common themes than the, off-work cocktail waitress at the dive bar. So there's just a different kind of, your choices will dictate who you're going to be with. And that's someone who's making similar choices. So in that respect, it's kind of a, no duh. As you say so eloquently.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't mean to slam them, because the way the study was designed, it seems like it was reasonably well conducted based on what I read in the Guardian piece. So it's not bad research. It's just that there's a lot of things we know intuitively to, as you said, there's certain, especially in the realm of relationships, right? There's no randomized trial that shows that I love my wife more than anyone else in the world, right? But that's necessarily true because I married her, and right. So I think that's sort of what we're dealing with here. And as you said, right, when you want to meet people, you go, well, where do I meet people that I want to meet? Well, I go to a bar, or I like live music, so I'm going to go watch a band or whatever, right? And then
or church.
Exactly.
Right. So yeah, it's you're getting different populations to draw from,
exactly,
which may share, and I think it weighs more towards females too in a lot of ways as the decision makers in relationships, early relationships, right? Because she may think you're just great, and and then you take her home to meet your mom, and and she realizes that it's because you live in your mom's house, and that all of a sudden maybe this isn't such a hot idea, there's a lot of things like that that I think females probably have some good deal breakers that they sense in male counterparts more than males, but that wasn't covered in the paper. So that's just my suspicion.
Yeah. Neither was this, but this is a pro tip. Meet the parents as early as you can. Very good advice.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah. Meet the parents. Well, because a lot of times, one of the things I hear is, especially about how women can judge males, is how they talk to their mom.
That's interesting.
How they treat their parent is how they're indicative of how they will treat you. So I don't know if that's true.
It might be. That could be a proxy.
And only to a point, of course. Would you like a foot massage, Mom?
This guy's really friendly with his mom. Okay. Nevertheless, I think this kind of research, as we wrap up here, it's interesting because it sort of confirms what we know, but it makes it more concrete, I guess, is a way that you can put it. You're not just going off your intuition, and you're not just, like people are like, I just have to be really mean to this chick and then she's going to like me, right? You don't go around with these weird ideas. It's actually gives you something to go off. So I think that's also kind of helpful.
Well, and in defense of the researchers, you don't set out you do this kind of research because you don't know what the outcome is going to be. You're testing a hypothesis, and this is the outcome. This is what they report. And the fact that we find it, intuitive is probably a good thing, So when we say no, duh, we're not slighting the research or the researchers. We're simply stating that the results were not surprising. And that happens all the time. It's when they're surprising that it gets kind of fun. And those are the leads that maybe they would follow up on next, are the 11 to 19% of places where things didn't fit. Maybe that tells us more about how we can have better relationships by looking at those things. So.
Yeah, that's a good point. Lots of interesting angles to explore here. But go check out the Guardian article and read the paper if you want. If you're feeling a little too energized, need to fall asleep, go read a meta-analysis of 200 studies over the course of almost 200 years.
120 years. And it is behind a paywall though. So if you need it, send me a note. If you're using it for nonprofit purposes, I can happily send you one.
There you go.
If you're using it for profit, I can sell you one.
$39.95 from Tandem Online. Okay. All right. Well, that's going to do it for the show this week. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for coming back, Kevin, and stepping in for Liza. It's so funny. She's going across Europe, and the internet gets worse and worse the further east she goes. She's like, I'm just going to take the week off. So thank you for stepping in. Follow us on social media. It's at Kevin Folta, if I remember correctly, at Cam J English. Yeah, he's going to write it for you on the screen there. Beautiful.
And then the little bump at the end. Yeah.
At Kevin Folta, at Cam J English. Genetic Literacy Project is at Genetic Literacy. They put the whole show on. We use their content. They gave us the platform. So thank you to them. Follow them, read their stuff. And with that, we will see you next week for 237.